right, we are going to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members Floyd, Frazier, Cost, Bub, and Marmee. First item on the agenda is a request for an appropriation in the amount of $21,600.
That is a retirement in the court system. Shelley McKinney is leaving us after several years, so that's a payout.
Motion.
Second.
A motion by Floyd, a second by Frazier. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $2,000.
This is a grant for spay and neuter. What we'll do is we'll appropriate the money into our budget. Alexandria Vet Hospital will perform the procedures. They'll invoice the police department. The police department will then pay once they have an invoice up to the total amount of the grant.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Floyd, second by Bub. Questions or discussion?
I have a question. Is this the full 2,000 or is it broken up?
We will probably do an initial purchase order for $500,
Yep.
and then supplement that purchase order as necessary.
With the rest of the grant?
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $175.
Good evening. This is one of those cases where an offender damaged a strap on one of our scram devices. It's $175. They've paid it back, so now we want to put it in the proper account and then use that money to buy another one.
Motion. Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Frazier. Questions or discussion? These folks just breaking these things all the time. Right?
They do, yes. It's kind of common.
Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda, request for appropriation in the amount of $40,000.
Yeah, I was here a couple of weeks ago and we had appropriated, I believe, $25,000 at the time. This is our incentive money that we received as a reward for how well we performed for fiscal year 16 and 17 in our probation improvement and incentive grant. So we want to move another $40,000 over. That would give us about half of the money that we received, and then we'd be ready to spend for different things. I think we talked last time about equipment and things like that. So we would just like to have, I think that put us up to $65,000. We received a total of $136,000, so it's about half. So.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Floyd, a second by Bob. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $750 from the Elks donation.
Yes, the Elks, are they women of the Elks? They're women of the Moose. I don't know how it is. But an Elks Association, a subset of the association, received a $750 grant or applied for it. They're donating it to the police department. The police department is going to buy tourniquets with it to be kept in the cruisers so that every police vehicle has a tourniquet available in case of officer or civilian injury.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Cost. Questions or discussion?
Do they not have tourniquets now? Is this brand new?
It's a personal choice. Yes, all the officers have tourniquets, but you could say that if I'm going to buy a tourniquet, It's not that I won't use it for somebody else, but it's pretty much a guaranteed personal use. This would be, there would be one in every cruiser to guarantee one in the car, because not necessarily every officer has bought one that I can attest to.
Yeah.
This way I can guarantee that every car on the scene has one in it. They'll be kept in the same place. It won't matter if it's your car or not your car. You'll know exactly where to go to get it.
Perfect.
Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Very much. With that, this Finance Committee stands adjourned. And next up is service.
Okay, we will call the Service Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Cost, Bub, Frazier, and Floyd. Up first, we have ordinance number 17-31, changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 847 West Locust Street, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of single-family residence, RL, low-density district, to GO, general office district. Who's here to speak on that?
Mr. Chair, I normally speak to these things, but I see that Ms. Avila is here, Diana is here, so I'd ask that she come out and speak to
Would
it.
that be the property owners?
That'd be the property owners.
Okay, if you guys would like to come up.
I'm Diana Avila. I live at 847 West Locust Street in Newark. I'm the one that has done child care there. We purchased our house in 2006, September, and I have done child care since 1995, actually. I've done it in a daycare setting, in a center. I've done it in home. I had a Type B license when we moved to the home, which is 1 adult to 6 children. And then after some changes, things like that, in 2013, the county and the state did some changing, and I had requested about a Type A in-home. I do have the license with me to show you that it says Type A. It's a home license. It's not a daycare center. It's not a commercial setting. It is for a home. And after I spoke to Mr. Moorhead and the engineer's office, zoning, as I'm going through the process with the state of Ohio, and received a letter and information that since we had already been there since 2006, had done child care, I had done it for many years before that, they didn't see an issue with me doing a Type A home, which is 2 adults to up to 12 children. They also sent me the code of 7.1.1, stating in so many words that something can continue since it's already happened in a place. I have the code with me if you need it read exactly, but I guess if you have any questions, I'm not asking to expand. I don't have a sign in my yard. I don't need a sign in my yard. We have second-generation children. We have children that have been on our waiting list, children that have been on our waiting list since before they were born. We have families that we've either had their older siblings, and now we have their younger siblings, or cousins, families, things like that. I have probably, in order to fit the waiting list, it would be over a year, because there is no movement unless a family moves away, things like that. We just wish to continue what we're doing, not expand what we're doing.
So let me ask you a question. What is
Sure.
the difference between you trying to change this to GO, General Office District, today versus you trying to change this to GO, General Office on June 9th, 2015?
That was a...
change
To
within the city of Newark?
To my understanding, that was a different board or advised through Nate and the zoning
No,
office.
that was this board. In fact, I have the minutes of that
Okay.
meeting, and I can read my statement for that period, which I most likely will before this meeting's over. That was
That's
this board. There was also
Okay.
the Board of Zoning Appeals that you went through. In fact, when you went through this board, through this committee, rather, on June 9th, 2015, it was voted down 5-0. It was not even sent to the Planning Commission. And when you went to the Board of Zoning Appeals, you were denied a second time, and now you're here a third time. So my question to you is, what has changed with your application between now and the last 2 times you've been here?
I was just going on what I was advised by the office. I thought it was different. I didn't realize you were the same board, so I'm sorry about that. My apologies.
Is there anybody else here who is here to speak in favor of changing this piece of property to general office?
And I don't wish to change anything. That's just what they said
Except
had
the
to
zoning of
happen.
the property, which is what our concern is.
I would just like to
So
be
if
able
you
to
were to
continue
change
to
it-
do what I do, not change anything. I'm not interested in changing. That's just what was
The issue
advised.
is if you change your piece of property, which is a residential house, in the middle of a residential neighborhood surrounded by residential homes, that would allow you or whoever owned the property from now until eternity to put in a broker, dealer in securities, insurance agents, real estate and sales, attorney and law practice, engineering and architectural services, accounting, auditing, or other bookkeeping services, social service agencies, government offices, a hospital, or a clinic. So if we were to change to that zoning, whether it be you or the future owner, would allow them to do any of those things. So on June 9th of 2015, me, myself, and 4 other board or committee members, including Mr. Cost, who sits here with me, turned you down. My reasoning at the time was that this was spot zoning, and it is absolutely spot zoning, and we absolutely do not do spot zoning in the city of Newark. So unless something has changed, unless something has changed, or somebody else is here to speak in favor of this, I'm going to move on to the next issue. So has anything changed?
And what do you mean by changed? I was just with the zoning office. I didn't say general office because I wouldn't have known that.
That's what the application says.
That is what Nate said
Apply for
that
GL.
had to be, and I said I don't want to change anything. I just want to be able to continue doing the care that I do now instead of negatively affecting families and telling families they have to go away or they have to make other arrangements when what I do in my home taking care of children doesn't affect anybody. It doesn't affect our neighbors or anyone around us.
Apparently it does because there are laws prohibiting it. There are laws there to protect homeowners. There are laws there to protect neighborhoods. There are laws there to protect children. And for lack of a better way of saying it, you're breaking the law. And the only way.
But I do have a state
make it
license, so
legal-
I thought, I went through all the steps and I had the letter
You have that
stating that it was
license. The
okay.
only thing you don't have is the piece of property to do it legally.
But I received a letter from the engineer's office and zoning before I did it. I went through the steps and did it properly and asked, can I do this? Is this okay? And I got a yes.
You can operate a daycare center, but you cannot exceed 6 children. That's the law. That's the way the property is zoned, and that's the way it's going to be zoned.
And is with the 7.1.1, and I'm not trying to come against you, I'm just simply asking questions, that it can continue because we were there since 2006 and doing care there.
I'm under the understanding that you cannot continue. And the reason I say that is this. Director Sasson, who is the city's law director, stated on June 9th, 2015, just for a point of clarification, our office has received complaints about this because the current zoning allows up to 6 children. We have made movement in the direction of prosecution pending this zoning application. I think this application is a result of zoning inspector making contact and explaining what the current zoning allows. We've held off on filing any charges pending what the city council expresses pending what city council expresses an opinion on the changing of the zoning. If you look at your zoning code, there are a variety of things allowed in general office district that aren't allowed in a residential district. The zoning would allow an unlimited amount of children. Children's Services has limited number of allowable. So they were withholding prosecution until they heard what the opinion was of this council, and in the opinion of this council on June 9th, 2015, was that your zoning change was denied. I've asked repetitively if there's anybody here to speak in favor of this, and nobody's come forward. I'm going to say
there are people that could be here, but I was just told this was just to pass on.
I'm also asking the people on this committee if there are anybody to speak in favor of this, and I know that there's not.
Can I ask a question?
If you must.
I must. What is the impact to your business? So you say that you've been operating like this, and by that you mean you've been operating above the 6-child level, and is that what the impact to the business is? Can you, as a clarification around that?
Sure. The license is for up to 12 children. So say I had 3 of your children, you have 3 and he has 3 and he has 2, and you get stuck in a meeting like tonight and you work over, but he has to go to work, so he has to drop off. And therefore, so for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, then we would be above the 6 children until, okay, you were able to get out of your meeting or work or what have you, and you pick up. Then it drops back down. So I'm not saying that I want 12 children first shift, 12 second shift, 12 third shift. We only work Monday through Thursday. We're closed Friday, Saturday, Sundays. Therefore, it would allow for that to have that fluctuation, so that the state license that I have, it is still in compliance with the children. So it's not that there are 12 children there all the time, traffic issues, things like that. That's not the case. It's not that I'm asking for that. I'm just asking so that parents that have that availability, or low-income families or things like that are on the Title 20 program through the county, if they're asked to work over, or hey, can you pull a double, or hey, they can do that for their family. That puts more money in their pocket, or for their family, or for their children. If they didn't have the flexibility of maybe they were somewhere else and that place was on a schedule, or they closed at a certain time, they would have to say no.
Ms. Floyd, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question, I had a comment. Mr. Mangus has talked to some neighbors and has some information that might be pertinent to this discussion.
Okay. Mr. Cost, did you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
The license that you hold for
Yes.
12 children, can I assume that one of the requirements of that license is that you be in compliance with local zoning?
And that's why I contacted zoning and the engineer's office to get the letter before I did it.
I guess what's being said is you're not in compliance with local zoning. And that is one of the requirements of the state license, unless I'm mistaken. I think
and that's why I got the letter before I did this license, and it approved me to go forth with the license. If zoning and the engineer's office or Brian Moorhead would have said no, then I wouldn't have went for the type A, and the state wouldn't have approved the type A. But because I have the letter that he gave to me, that's why everything passed through, because
but you haven't
they said
passed
it was okay.
through the compliance with zoning for the city.
Mr. Mangus, were you going to speak in favor of the zoning change?
Last evening, I spoke with 9 people, neighbors, and I can give you their reaction to the zoning change if you would like.
Were they in favor of the zoning change?
Of the 9, there was 1 person who was in favor. 2, one said he didn't care what happened either way. 1 person was shocked that it was coming before zoning again, and the remainder said absolutely not. And these are all people on Locust and on Church Street.
As am I. The fact of the matter is the opinion of the neighbors, quite honestly, is irrelevant. This is spot zoning.
Can I ask what it affects the neighbors, what I do in my home?
That's why we have zoning. That's why we have neighborhoods. Do you want a hospital in the middle of your neighborhood?
I mean,
or a clinic?
There's homes on Main Street around the hospital, so I guess it doesn't.
That's
not my choice.
Purpose of zoning.
It just depends on where you purchase and where you choose to live.
That's the purpose of zoning, to be able to design what goes where. And, I mean, it's no different than if I wanted to put a strip club next to your house. We wouldn't allow that because it wouldn't be inappropriate at that location. Nor would this be appropriate at this location. We've gone through you've gone through this committee prior, you've gone through the Board of Zoning Appeals, prior, and we've gone, now you're here to see me again. And do we want to have a vote on this, or should we just move on? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I am not going to make a motion.
So we voted, we've discussed, we voted. You're welcome to come back again, but as I told you on the phone last week, your answer is going to be the same. It is spot zoning. We will not.
Can I ask what the zoning would need to be then? Am I being advised wrong?
Yes, the zoning would need
for
to
general
be
office?
general office, and you would need to find a location outside of your neighborhood.
Even though the license is for in-home,
Yes.
not a commercial setting. That is not at all what the license
It
is.
does not allow you to operate in-home with more than 6 children in the city of Newark in a residential neighborhood.
Okay.
Mr. Marmee.
I'm going to even take it further to tell you what would occur. It's spot zoning. Not only that, you get general office. Now you have to have your entire home ADA certified because it's general office. It's now a commercial property, and you're going to have to comply with all ADA standards, which means handicapped ramps, handicap access to all restrooms. All of that would have to be in compliance when you go into a business.
Not to mention that you'd have to have a certain number of parking spots per square footage of the house, rather than a driveway.
But people don't park there and stay.
It doesn't matter. It's not what it's what the law is. If you're going to need general office, you have to comply with general office fully. If you're going to operate a daycare center, you need to comply with the laws fully, not just bits and pieces of them. So if you're going to be general office, you have to have ample number of parking spots. You need to have ramps. You need to have restrooms. You need to have all of that compliance needs to go in there. That's another reason why we won't put that in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
Can I ask you, is there any way to continue to do what I do without changing? Or I was just advised
Sure,
general
have 6
office,
children
I
or
didn't
less.
say that. So,
Sure, have 6 children or less.
at one time, right? I mean,
Yes.
I can, because I can move the different parents can move their schedules around to where I can do the 3 shifts just like I do now, but I can have 6, 6, and 6. I'm sure that neighbors will, not all neighbors, but neighbors will complain because they don't like it because children are playing outside at nighttime or anything just so that they can be heard.
They can complain all they want, but that you're well within your rights.
And I can do
have
that.
To do
So no matter
childcare in
what
your
I do,
home
as
with
long as
6
I have
children or
6 at
less.
one time, I have no issues.
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
Okay.
I'm not an expert on the law,
Sure.
but as far as I'm concerned, from what I understand, yes. And you have property rights as well. So you have the right to operate a daycare center with 6 children
It's
or
not
less.
daycare, it's just childcare in home. There's a totally different thing from commercial daycare center.
Whatever it is you want to call it, whatever
to-
it is, you have a right to operate that, whatever it is you call it, with 6 children or less on your property, and they can complain all they want. It doesn't matter, you have the right to do that.
Okay.
Just like they have the right to not have a hospital next door to them, or a daycare with 12 kids, or child care center, or whatever it's called. They have a right to move into a residential neighborhood and expect that residential neighborhood to remain residential.
Okay, can I ask one more question?
Last
Why would
one.
they have sent the code 7.1.1
I can't
to
answer
me?
that, I don't know.
Okay,
I can't answer that, I don't know.
okay.
Okay? All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Up next, consider ordinance 17-32, an ordinance amending chapter 1234.02 of the codified ordinance of the city of Newark, Ohio, relative to the residency requirement of members of the Board of Zoning Adjustment/Appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What this is a housekeeping issue. We randomly go through the charter and double check to make sure that things line up. To be a member of the, say, Planning Commission, it speaks to a residency requirement in the charter, but it is silent on that issue for the Board of Zoning Appeals. So at this time, we'd just like to pass this so that if somebody owns a business in the city or works in the city, they might have an opportunity to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals because they're in conflict right now.
Okay. Motion by Bub. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Second by Frazier. Mr. Frazier, you have a question?
The citizens of Newark part is a big concern. Are they able to get a waiver from council?
I don't know. That'd be a good question for the law director.
It's similar to our requirement with director positions, where they have to be a resident. So the citizen of Newark and resident of Newark.
I'd have to look at the charter. It's a good question. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, because my thought is I mean, it's just like with the director position to encourage residents, citizens of Newark to be included there. So, I mean, if we could keep some sort of residency citizenship requirement as a
this would be a good issue for the charter next time. It would be an item that I think we should bring up and bring it in line with the Planning Commission because they're in conflict right now.
And I mean, the other housekeeping items is just changing appeals to adjustment, right? I mean, just getting the name right.
Yep.
And so, would you be opposed if we corrected that, but we kept as an amendment the citizens of Newark or the residency requirement? Would that be okay, or?
I think since it's in conflict with the charter now, I'd like to bring it in line with the charter because the charter really kind of guides the city.
Yeah, and how is it in conflict? Is it just doesn't speak?
It's silent on the issue.
On the board of zoning.
On the residency issue.
Okay, on the residency.
It's silent.
Okay.
But on the Planning Commission, it speaks to it.
Okay.
I just think it's a housekeeping issue. That's all.
So changing this from citizens out to members brings it consistent with our charter currently.
Members, citizens. Come again with your question. I'm not following you.
By eliminating the citizen requirement.
And
that brings it into alignment with our charter the way it reads currently. Is that correct?
I don't have the charter in front of me, so I wouldn't speak to that, but requirement of the members of the board of zoning. Yeah, I got with Doug Sasson on this issue, and we felt this was the best way to bring them in line together.
All right. Any other questions from the members of the committee? Mr. Cost.
So would there be any kind of requirement, a business or a property ownership, or?
Well, what I would say is let's put it this way: if we were going to appoint somebody to the board like we do, it comes to city council, and if we were going to appoint somebody to the board who doesn't live in the city, I would think that we would have a fair number of reasons why we think that's an important board appointment. You know, because you guys ultimately confirm the appointments.
So, if I may, my thought is to pass out a committee, talk to the law director, see what we can do to encourage a residency or a property ownership requirement. And that way we go in line with the charter as well as, and so that way we can still offer a waiver if there is a qualified applicant who would want to come in. And the citizens of Newark thing seems pretty broad to me anywhere. It's not a residency requirement, it's not a property ownership requirement. So I would probably lean on the residency piece, and then if there was a waiver process, just do the waiver process.
That's fine.
What my thought is.
I'm fine with that.
So let me ask Mr. Frazier a question. You talked about a property owner and a bunch of other things. Would you be satisfied if we said a business owner as well? Included that?
I would say a resident would be the easiest way instead of trying to, that's what our requirement is for directors, right? A residency requirement for.
Yep, that's spoke to in the charter.
Yeah.
And this is silent. And those are the real differences. If you went to a property owner, then at least you have somebody that is invested in the city.
Yeah.
Invested.
But I would want to include business owners as well.
Yes.
Because there are business owners in the city of Newark that own businesses in Newark.
Right.
That may not own property.
Right. And they might live right out the, okay,
Sure.
yeah.
And they may not own the building that they operate out of. They may be leasing that.
Right. Fair enough. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. But again, as we walk through these appointments, we bring the appointments to council. And let's just use an example. I use Bill Cost as an example. He's a property owner. Let's say he didn't live in Newark, but he'd been on West Main for 30 years running a successful business. Well, maybe Bill had a little more time and he wanted to give to the city with his expertise and his love for the city, but he might live 2 houses out of the city limits. Then at that point, I would make a recommendation that we would appoint Bill, and I would give council reasons why, and then you guys could either confirm or not. And it's your choice, but the word business owner, Jeff, I think is fair. But it is a housekeeping issue. In 5 years, when we do the charter, we should determine the language that we'd like to have.
Why didn't this come up in the charter review?
I don't know.
They just missed it?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to say they missed it. I wouldn't want to say they missed it. That's not fair. With the charter review, sometimes the problem is they get 5 individuals put together who really don't know each other. Some of them have more knowledge on the city and less. And unless we have a predetermined list of things we want them to look at, they come in with their own individual ideas, which in some cases, they could say, gosh, let's go from 4 directors to 2 directors, or let's go from let's get rid of the large council members. Things I would be opposed to, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a little bit, it's a little wide open there.
Yeah.
But no, Mark, I wouldn't want to say that they missed it. I'd rather say it wasn't an issue that was brought to their attention.
Fair enough. Any other questions from committee members? Any questions from the audience? Mr. Lang?
Yeah, I pulled up the charter, confirmed there is no residency requirement in the charter. I guess the one thing I would ask Dave, when you talk to Director Sasson, it also looks like the terms are 4 years, not 5.
Yes, they are 4 years.
Okay.
I believe the appointments are 4 years. That's off the top of the head.
Thought I saw 5 in the current.
Yeah.
Does it say 5?
On the back
Current
page.
says 5, so that may be something we also want to clean up.
Absolutely. Again, a housekeeping issue.
Pardon?
Just a housekeeping issue. So feel free to call Doug. I've spoke with Doug about this, and that's how we came up with this.
So at a minimum, we'll have 1 amendment for the 5 years, and then whatever citizen.
I kind of like Jeff's idea of the business owner, because it does capture somebody who's invested in Newark, and they might.
And you have the opposite side of a resident that works outside
Right.
that would still be qualified too. So it'd be resident and business owner.
So we're looking at 5 members that are property owners or business owners. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That moves on to full council without any doubt. Amendments with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Up next, consider resolution number 17-52, a resolution authorizing participation by the City of Newark in the U.S. Communities Government Purchasing Alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You want the long story or the short story?
I want the short story, but I inevitably will get the long story with thousands of questions, so go ahead. Give your best shot.
Let me start with the short version, and then I'll tell you how we got here. Okay. Short version is we want to be able to participate in the U.S. Communities Government Purchasing Alliance. That is an alliance that has been bid out, it's been vetted, and it's pricing has been approved at a higher level for municipalities than, say, the city of Newark. It is a buying group. People have to sell things at certain prices that have been bid out. That's the short version. Long version is, if you look at the city of Newark's utility bill, something that we've looked at very, very hard, there's 605 highway lights, on-ramp, off-ramp lights, under-bridge lights. To operate those lights each year, it costs the city $205,000 a year in utility costs. And it costs the city $24,000 a year in maintenance costs. If I upgrade those to LED, which I'd have to come back and ask you guys to let me borrow a little bit of money, my cost to operate those lights would go to $56,000 a year, down from $204,000, and my cost for maintenance would drop from $24,000 to right around $10,000. We screened a couple different groups, and when I say we, I want to identify we. Myself, the mayor, the auditor, the law director, I believe Mark Motter sat in with us, and we interviewed different groups that came in and gave us proposals for LED lights. I'll give you a glaring example. If you're headed east on the highway and you come through Granville into the new section of the interchange there, those are all LED lights. They're nice and bright. Then you go into the sodium lights, which are yellow. Those sodium lights are very expensive to operate. What our proposal would be, if this passes, would be to enter into contract with the group that does the government purchasing alliance, come back to council and ask you guys to let me borrow somewhere in the area of about $350,000. And I'd put it in my budget like we have for the past couple years for highway lighting, and I would pay this back in about 2.2 years, and we would have 605 new LED lights in the city, lights that are guaranteed probably for somewhere in the area of 15 years. So really all I'm asking tonight, and that's the long story, is just give me the ability to participate in a group like this. And if that's granted and it gets passed through council, then what I'll do is I'll come back with a PowerPoint presentation showing you the actual numbers and things like that, and probably do that at Finance Committee. That's the long version. So I want to save some money and have brighter lights and have, frankly, and have less guys in the highway changing out lights in center lanes, which is not really all that safe for our employees, quite frankly.
I make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Floyd, seconded by Bub. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience?
I just have a comment. You know, I love taking money. So great work on this.
Thank you.
Is this a private organization?
No, it's a larger company, and I'll get all the information for you guys, and we'll do a nice PowerPoint when we get to that level.
And they partner with other municipalities currently?
Yep, they do. And I'll have them come in and give a PowerPoint to you guys so you guys can really see what we saw that day. But when this thing came to my attention and we kind of vetted people, I really kind of felt before I brought it to you guys it ought to be vetted in front of course, the mayor, the economic development director, the auditor, and the law director, of which they did do, and then Doug Sasson did a lot of work and time and energy to say, yes, this is something that you can participate in, and yes, this is something I think is good. And the auditor came out in favor of it too. So that's why we're here to this point tonight, to ask you guys to allow me to participate with that. And then next thing I'll do is I'll bring to you the opportunity for me to enter into contract with asking you to let the auditor borrow some money to do this.
Yep.
And we would be participating with some local companies too for lights like Hall of Fame, things like that.
Perfect. Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? See none, all those in favor of sending this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0. Excuse me, Service Committee is adjourned. Up next will be Capital Improvements Committee.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Capital Improvements Committee to order. Those present, Dee Hall, Jeff Rath, Mike Mangus, myself, and Mark Frazier. First the agenda is consider resolution number 1751 to appropriate $1,500 for professional services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What this is you guys are aware of, we're moving the seal from 16 to the downtown exit. This was a donation from State Farm in the amount of $1,500. We're asking to expedite this to help move the process along. It is money we've encumbered. We just want to get it into a PO, and so Mr. Moorhead can plan the work.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Frazier, second by Rath. Any discussion or questions?
I have a question. Is this the last one, or are we expecting additional ones to come forward? Or?
This is the last one. We did the one from the Newark Development Partners, and we did the one from Capital Improvements. This will be the last one.
And by expediting this, is that going to increase the time?
Yeah, we want to get it done. Per the grant through the Lincoln County Foundation, we're under somewhat of a timeline, and so yes, it does help.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so by fall, you think?
I'd have to check with the engineer. He's doing it in coordination with the bridge, and
I'm just curious.
yeah, the other things are going on too. Just for general knowledge, we have a meeting later this week with the United Methodist Church. They want to be involved a little bit too. They might help with keeping some of the vines and everything back. Occasionally when you get off the highway there, you see the vines kind of hanging over, and we trim those about twice a year. They might do some permanent control on that. And so we're just trying to dress the area up, and they want to be a good community partner, so we have a meeting with them coming up too.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, we will vote. Take this to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. And next on the agenda, consider resolution 1754. It's appropriations of $1,200 for machinery and equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We in the city of Newark, we take down a lot of trees. We have trees that fall. We have trees that encumber power lines. We have trees that fall in courthouse grounds and fall in the cemetery. A lot of times the chainsaws that we have aren't big enough to handle the trees that have fallen. So what we end up doing is we end up bidding that work out, work that we could do ourselves if we had the proper tools. And this chainsaw of $1,200 will actually be probably about a third of the cost of removing a big tree that we could do ourselves had we have the equipment. And that's why I'm asking for the appropriation.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Should beat you to it there, Jeff. Got a motion. Any discussion or further questions?
How many big trees do we have come down a year?
It's a fair question. If we get a big windstorm, we got a bunch.
Okay.
I don't know, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, but you have a need every year.
Every year. Unfortunately.
You got to fix it now.
Yeah.
Mr. Marmon?
Yes, David, I have a question for
Sure.
you. I mean, we've gone from weed eaters and things like that being in capital improvements and then kind of moving off, and now, and the reason why we did that, I just want to ensure that this chainsaw, there's an inventory. We had in the past where we were buying weed eaters every year and we didn't even know where they were, how has our inventory changed, as far as those types of items?
That's
with winches and all that.
Doug, that is a phenomenal question, and it is an item that we've worked on very, very hard. What we have done is we've taken inventory of all of our equipment, everything, and then we've rendered it down on paper, and we've counter-checked it with our insurance company to see what's covered, what's not covered. And when we did that, we actually found things that we had sold that we were still covering. So it's been a good process. This particular chainsaw will be held at the Parks and Cemetery Department. Although if the street department needs it, they will come and get it, and they will sign it out and bring it back. So, and it'll be included on our insurance in case of theft, so it will be accounted for. That's a good question, because it is a problem we've had in the past.
Any other questions or discussion? We'll vote on moving this on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The agenda
Thank you.
of the committee, and we'll adjourn.